is a chiropractor from Ventura, California, and we are in the symposium course, and we are with 1,200 other doctors and other healthcare practitioners. And I wanted to ask Kristofer today, what is bringing you here to this conference?
Sort of the easy answer is functional medicine. I was lucky enough to be directed to Jeff Bland more than 20 years ago, actually before the Institute for Functional Medicine was actually founded. And it was he and the Institute were so compelling, but continue to be so compelling. And that's part of what's interesting. I'm not the kind of person where I just get connected to something at one point and then I just keep doing it. To me, things need to move me, and this organization and this symposium moved me.
Hello and welcome. I'm Heather McLean, and this is my husband, Dr. Jeff Greenfield. He's an osteopath who practices down in Manchester, New Hampshire. We just returned from a symposium from the Institute of Functional Medicine held in Dallas, Texas. We never really explored Dallas, but we did explore many things in terms of functional medicine that we would like to share with you today. We have several heavy-hitting guests today that are sort of rock stars in our world of functional medicine. Our first one will be Jeffrey Bland, and we'll introduce the others as they come along. So, Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about functional medicine?
Yes, I'll do my best. Okay. So, I was trained as a traditional physician, which means that I was trained in a disease care model of medicine, and pretty much taught that one thing causes one disease and has one treatment. Another thing causes another disease and has another treatment. Then all of a sudden we have people with lots of different disease entities and lots of different treatments. Well, then comes functional medicine along. And this, instead of this disease care model, is more of a healthcare model.
Okay, and so this kind of functional medicine, we know between you and I how much nutrition that involves. It's a very important component. But how can we define it to the people so that they can understand, say, the difference between this and integrative medicine?
Well, functional medicine is a form of integrative medicine.
Okay.
But there's many forms of integrative medicine. Functional medicine is something that ties them all together, but instead of just treating a disease process, we go back and try to look for the health.
And you're treating the whole person.
And treating the whole person with all those tools in mind, all those integrative, but not only integrative tools, Western medicine tools as well. Do functional medicine doctors use drugs? Absolutely, when it's necessary.
Okay.
Okay, but it's certainly not always the first line. You talked about nutrition. Do we use nutrition? We use a lot of nutrition because as far as environment, that's the biggest environmental factor we have.
Absolutely.
Because we have to eat every day.
That's right.
And food that we put in our mouth has messages. And those messages talk to our body. And if they're messages of health, we're healthy. If they're messages that we're not quite sure how to interpret, then we have a stress response. And our bodies do what they're made to do and they rebel. I'm not quite sure I'm going to attack that, I think.
So what that means in lay people's terms is 3 people come in, same symptoms, but when you go to a functional medicine doctor, they're probably going to find 3 entirely different causes for the same symptoms. Am I right?
That's correct.
In light of that, I'd like to share with you Dr. Jeff Bland and my interview with him.
Yeah, Jeff is just this genius at integrating all this data and putting it together in this web interaction. Mm-hmm. And as you'll see, he speaks a little bit fast and passionately, mm-hmm. Definitely passionately. Yeah. Imagine him speaking that fast with chemistry and biochemistry.
Oh, he can do it too.
And he does.
Yes, and he's a very, very lovely, humble man with incredible integrity. And he was so kind to give me this interview, so thank you, Jeff Bland.
Thank you.
I am here, I have the special pleasure of introducing you to Dr. Jeffrey Bland, and he is one of the fathers, if not the father, of the Institute of Functional Medicine. And I'm just nervous talking to him because you and my husband are probably why I got my master's degree in nutrition.
All right.
Because I had to understand what you were saying. And so what I wanted to ask you for the general public is what you'd like to convey to them about functional medicine and its potential impact in our healthcare system and how people can seek that out, perhaps.
Yeah. So, I think we all feel the same thing, no matter where we are in our life stream, whether we're kind of in our young adulthood or we're parents of young children or we're kind of in the 40s and 50 age group where we're starting to really kind of build our career or in our retirement years or maybe even our last kind of the silver years. The same question comes up, and that is, how do I navigate through this complex healthcare system so that I can keep myself healthy, I can be fully capable of doing what I want to do, I can enjoy the different phases of my life, I can compress illness into but a very small part of my life, if any at all, and I can really enjoy what I would call an optimal health span. And then people look at the healthcare system that they're engaged in today with insurance reimbursement, standards of care, with kind of managed care systems, and they say, I know my doc is trying to do a good job, but it just doesn't seem like I'm getting what I need. And so how can I find services that are related to me? I don't want this 6-minute office visit. I don't want this immediate rush to prescribe something for every symptom that I come in with. I want someone to understand my situation. I want to have a relationship that will help me to navigate through this complex health matrix so that I can achieve my personal objectives and I don't just become feeling like I'm a number or I'm another subscriber of a prescription product. I want to be part of my own solution, health solution. So those questions, whenever they occur, and they occur in different people at different places along their life, but for most people, eventually those questions come up. Then they say, okay, what are my options? And the options that we feel are available is a personalized kind of healthcare delivery system with docs who know how to ask the right questions, who have both the training and experience to know when disease is present and how to manage it, but also have the experience of how to promote health and how to increase the ability of an individual to achieve what I would call optimal function throughout the course of living, knowing that we will lose some function as we age, but we don't have to lose it at an accelerated rate. Well, that's a functional medicine doctor. That's what functional medicine training is all about. It's asking a different series of questions. It's not asking what disease do you have, it's asking why are you not feeling well? What is it in your personal situation of how your genes connect with your lifestyle and environment to create your outcome that's called your health? How can we maximize the potential for that interaction to be successful? And this sounds a little esoteric and maybe airy-fairy, but in the reality, that kind of training is not the training that most doctors get in medical school. They get training about what is the name of the disease, how do you recognize it, what's the diagnosis, and then what is the standard of care to manage the symptoms of that disease. Versus this model that I'm describing, which is what is the nature of that person's life history, what are their genetics, what's their environment, what are their lifestyle habits, how does that interrelate then with the production of their own sense of function. It could be cognitive function, it could be physical function, it could be physiological function, and then how do we adjust their environment to give them a program that they can live with that's going to achieve their health objectives. That's a different kind of doctor than the doctor who is trained just to recognize disease and treat its symptoms. So the functional medicine model to me is a very powerful reframing of the doctor-patient relationship. Or let's call it the practitioner-patient relationship, because it doesn't necessarily always have to be the primary care provider. It may be an ancillary person that's involved with nutrition education, lifestyle management. It may be a health coach. It may be someone that's helping with who's a professional in stress management or in physical movement or in areas of exercise therapy. All of these things then become part of this, what I call distributive healthcare system that's focused on health, not just disease. As we all know, today the problem is that we get full reimbursement and people make livings out of disease. we'd like to kind of reframe this so that people could make a living and be professionally successful out of promoting health. And so that's another interesting way of reframing the equation today. That doesn't mean that we would give over our disease care system. We are always going to have, trauma and crisis, and we want to have this magnificent hospital-based system that we have. But we need to have this other portion of the system, which, by the way, 72% of our healthcare expenditures in the United States are spent on chronic diseases, not acute diseases. So who manages those? Who manages the health of the individuals that's not in the hospital, but they're not optimally healthy? They're walking around with like a walking wounded illness,
Right.
And that's where this functional medicine model plays such a significant role. And it's probably why we've seen such a rapidly rising interest in functional medicine. We started the Institute for Functional Medicine in 1991. It's now 2013, and now we have 1,200 practitioners at our meetings. We have CME accreditation for medical doctors to go through the courses. We have a medical textbook. We have a certification course for doctors and practitioners to be certified. And it's starting to get traction, what Gladwell calls a tipping point. Why is that? Because we have an unmet need. And it's in the minds of health consumers saying we need a different system to balance out this disease care system. So that's a long-winded kind of explanation as to how I think functional medicine differentiates itself and also the service that it provides to healthcare.
That's quite the explanation. And to drive it home, I just want you to talk about, you've discussed the whole issue of nutrition. And how would you sum that up, and how important it is for people to understand that what they put in their mouths has an effect on their genes?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important part of the equation. There are very few things that we do every day that substantively build the protoplasm and the working operations of our body, other than the fluid we drink in water, the air that we breathe and oxygen, and the food that we eat that has all these other nutrients in it that actually builds new protoplasm, builds new body material. So if someone says, well, I just eat whatever is available, and if it tastes good, it's okay, and gee whiz, I don't think I have any like nutritional deficiency disease. I don't have scurvy or beriberi or pellagra or xerothymia or rickets, or I don't have kwashiorkor or marasmus, all these named nutritional deficiency disease, so I must be okay. Then we start asking, well, okay, how about things like chronic pain, chronic fatigue? How about cognitive function? How about foggy brain syndrome? How about allergies? How about skin problems? How about digestive difficulties? Well, yeah, I do have a few of those. Well, then let's start looking at your nutrition, because those are the early symptoms for your nutrition not matching up with your genes. Because food is not just nutrients. Food is information that really creates. Yes, exactly right. It's speaking to our genes through this whole signaling process where nutrients are picked up by receptors on the cells of our body, and they are then signaling to the interior of the cell, hey, all is cool out here, we love it, have your bliss genes turned on and enjoy life, or hey, it's not so good out here, there's alarm out here, there's a battle to be waged, turn on your warlike machinery, which we call inflammation, and the diseases we have today, as you know, are inflammatory diseases. So a high-fat, high-sugar, depleted diet produces inflammation in the body. So here's a direct connection between the message of a food creating an outcome in the cell that's called disease. So how do we manage that? Better nutrition, nutrition counseling, matching the genes with that person's diet. It's a whole new world.
And it is a good one in this case.
It is.
We're going to keep working on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's really been fun.
This has been incredible. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I could have said it better.
Well, that was a lot of information, and we often describe Dr. Bland as somebody who delivers so much information that attempting to absorb all the information is similar to taking a sip of water from a fire hose.
So we can unfasten our seatbelts then?
Yeah, we can unfasten our seatbelts for a moment, because next we're going to go to Dr. Tom O'Brien. He is a gluten sensitivity and celiac disease expert. Now, what do you think about that, Jeff?
A little segue. When I first got into medicine in the late 80s and into the 90s, when I would work with patients, they seemed to get well a lot faster. Somewhere in the late 90s and early 2000s, people became harder and harder to treat. One of the keys came when I started following and learning from Dr. O'Brien. And one of the keys is this connection with gluten and what it does to our gut and our immune system. But I think he describes it best.
Yes, and before I go to that clip, we have to understand that we've been eating wheat a long time, and we all know that. And often people say, well, what's the problem? There are so many things going on, say, for example, with genetically modified foods. How can they make somebody gluten sensitive? Well, we just listened to Jeff Smith.
Jeff Smith,
Jeff
yes.
Smith, and you can mention that for a moment.
Yes, Jeff Smith is a advocate against genetically modified foods, and he was interviewing a PhD who's been doing some, and I can't remember her name, but
Okay, that's all right.
they've been doing research into the effect of genetically modified foods, particularly foods that have been treated with Roundup or glyphosate,
Yeah, glyphosate,
on
or glyphosate.
our gut microbiome. Apparently this molecule is not supposed to harm humans. It's geared at something in plants only, but our gut bacteria are like plants. So they were talking about how it affects our gut microorganisms, which we have 100 trillion of, and they outnumber our own human cells 10 to 1, such that they become more aggressive, they can injure the gut, they can cause the ability of things like gluten to take hold.
Right, because this glyphosate can actually cause perforations in the gut, is what they're saying, and destroy some of the good bacteria, preferentially. And this whole issue with our gut microbiome is that we have about 4 pounds of bacteria in our intestinal area, and that is not haphazard. That's there for a reason. So this glyphosate can go in and actually wreak havoc on that, cause perforations, and then all of a sudden there are so many food allergies. People are allergic to things they never have been before, and gluten's difficult to digest, so that becomes a major culprit.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to let Tom O'Brien take us through the rest.
We're on.
Hi, I have with me today Dr. Tom O'Brien, and he is an international speaker on gluten sensitivity and celiac disease. He is also on the teaching faculty with the Institute of Functional Medicine, and we're going to just ask Tom today about why gluten sensitivity is such a problem today, and gluten sensitivity and celiac disease are often, I think, misunderstood by the public. And so I thought maybe you could shed a little light on that for us.
Sure, sure. Gluten sensitivity is becoming more and more talked about. It's in the news all of the time now, and the reason for that is that more people are developing a sensitivity to gluten. Gluten is a protein in wheat, and wheat products are in all of our diets multiple times a day, every day. So if you consider that perhaps this is a food that you may have a sensitivity to, it's not making you sick so you don't throw up, but it's causing some problems inside that stimulate the deterioration that eventually becomes a disease. If that's the case, then, oh my gosh, I want to know about this. That's why so many people that stop gluten, even as a trial, they feel so much better. There are so many symptoms that diminish immediately within a few days of going on a gluten-free diet. Headaches, fatigue, clearer mind function, children who can perform in school who've been diagnosed with attention deficit. The list goes on and on of the potential symptoms because it may impact on any part of the body, And the question as to why is it more prevalent today? Is it really more prevalent, or we're just talking about it more? The answer is that it's more prevalent. In the last, since 1970, we know that it's risen fourfold higher since 1970. 4 times more people have this, not because of better diagnostic testing, but because of the loss of immune tolerance. And that's the critical takeaway that all of us can benefit from. And what that means is that our immune systems are fighting to protect us. And the more toxic stuff that we're exposed to in our water, in the air, in the food that we eat. They spray antibiotics on our food when they're growing vegetables. They spray antibiotics on it. The heavy metals, the toxic chemicals, the more of that we're exposed to, our immune system has to protect us from all of it. And eventually, it can't handle the load, and the result is loss of immune tolerance. When you have loss of immune tolerance, you then become more sensitive or more vigilant, if you will, to things that your body was tolerating before, like gluten, the protein in wheat. And the reason gluten is such a big one is because no human can digest this protein. We are unable to, as humans, we're unable to digest it. Now, whether it makes you sick or not just depends on whether you've lost tolerance.
Okay. And one other question, well, actually two, if you don't mind. I'll make it really fast. But this whole issue of people having symptoms with gluten sensitivity or celiac disease, but it leads into a broader and deeper issue of autoimmune disorders.
Yes. Oh, that's my bread and butter. That's what I love talking about. We've always known that the number 3 cause of getting sick and dying is autoimmune diseases. The immune system attacking ourself, whether it's our thyroid or our liver or our brains. And traditionally in healthcare, we compartmentalize them. So if you have MS, you go to a neurologist. If you have psoriasis, you go to a dermatologist. We compartmentalize them. But the mechanism is very similar for all of them. And it's that mechanism that we're dealing with. And what happens when you have gluten sensitivity, meaning that you've lost tolerance, is that you create something in the intestines called intestinal permeability. The slang term is the leaky gut. And the leaky gut, we now know, especially after Dr. Fasano's presentation last night, the leaky gut, the intestinal permeability, is one of the, he calls it the holy trinity in the development of autoimmune diseases. You can't change your genes. It's hard to change all the environmental toxins we're exposed to, the water, the air, and everything. But what you do have an impact on is the intestinal permeability. So by addressing the intestinal permeability, healing the intestinal permeability, you have the possibility of slowing down or arresting, that's the language they use, arresting the development of autoimmune diseases.
This is huge.
Huge.
And one of the main things you use to shore up the gut is colostrum.
That's correct. That is one of the, there are many components. Colostrum is a primary one. Some doctors just use that exclusively because it has so many ways that it helps, and it does a really great job.
Okay, well, I want to thank you, and if people want to get more information on Dr. Tom O'Brien, you can go to thedoctor.com. That's THEDR.com. Anything else I can share?
No, thank you, Heather. It's really a pleasure.
Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you. What'd you think of that, Jeff?
I love listening to Tom O'Brien. I mean, he can put this complex subject together very well. And he alluded to this lecture that we had by a researcher, an MD, PhD, who used to be at University of Maryland and then just recently moved up to Harvard and got his own lab because he has some really interesting discoveries. He found that he has a model of celiac disease and gluten sensitivity where he has found that this gluten molecule can go into the gut. It can cause a release of this chemical that he found that he named zonulin. And zonulin then has the ability to open up our gut cells. In general, the cells of our gut are almost glued together in these things called tight junctions, so that any digested food substances have to take the doorways that are made physiologically to get to the other side. And on the other side lies 70% of our body's lymphatic tissue or immune system. So there's certain things you don't want that to see. The zonulin is like a key that opens up the door between cell-to-cell contact. It opens up this tight junction so that these larger molecules of undigested food substances can enter right in, be seen by the immune system, and wreak havoc. It's like, you know, a terrorist or two going through a TSA booth. They catch them on the other side, but what happens in every other airport in the country? All of a sudden they're on alert. What happens to every police department in the country? all of a sudden they're on alert, and that happens in our body. And so this discovery by Dr. Fasano and his group has implications that I can only begin to think about. He basically has, and researchers who are looking at this now have found that most autoimmune disease has a zonulin-related component or a leaky gut-related component.
That's right.
So does autoimmune disease start in our gut?
Absolutely.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, okay, so there's a lot to the nutrition, and we're going to keep going on that. Our next guest is Dr. Terry Wahls. She's going to talk about her story with multiple sclerosis. She had secondary progressive, or she still has it, but she was also wheelchair bound in a reclining wheelchair, 24/7.
And she was on some of the strongest medications that we have for MS.
Through the top doctors, she was being treated in our current disease care model, which is given the best drugs on the market to combat multiple sclerosis. And so, what do you think of her interview?
I think she's going to tie a lot of things together for us.
She is. She is. Okay, let's
What an
watch.
amazing person.
Yeah, she's a really wonderful person. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Terry. All right, start again.
Okay. Hi, I'm with Terry Wahls, and she is a doctor, and her specialty right now is working in the field of multiple sclerosis as my hair blows all over the place. And Terry had a dramatic improvement from her own multiple sclerosis and got herself out of a wheelchair, and she's going to tell us a little bit about that.
So very quickly, I have secondary progressive multiple sclerosis. I was diagnosed in Wisconsin, then went to the Cleveland Clinic who confirmed my diagnosis. I took Copaxone. Within 3 years of diagnosis, my disease had transitioned to secondary progressive multiple sclerosis. I was in a two-recline wheelchair. I took Novantrone, then I took Tizabri, continued my decline. I discovered ancestral health, the paleo diet, functional medicine, and neuromuscular electrostimulation of my muscles. When I began that very intensive program of mostly Paleolithic diet, nutrition,
Yep.
and then some of the other things I learned with functional medicine and electrostimulation of my muscles, within a year, I was out of the wheelchair. I was able to walk throughout the hospital. In fact, I could do an 18-mile bicycle ride with my family. So very exciting stuff.
Wow. And this is, okay, go ahead.
And then a couple years later, I was able to get a IRB approval to do a clinical trial, testing my protocol and others with progressive multiple sclerosis. We have results from the first wave, and that's under review now, hopefully to be published soon. The second wave of people coming through will finish their year of treatment in December this year, so we'll be writing that up. Very exciting stuff, and I have funding now to begin recruiting on a third wave of subjects, again with a little more intensive protocol. We're very excited.
This is absolutely exciting. I refer to your website all the time, and I'd like you to share that with people.
Oh yeah, so if you go to Terry Wahls, that's TerryWahls.com, you'll see a lot of information about my story, links to my books, lectures. I should also tell you I'm working on my next book, and we anticipate that will be released sometime about a year from now. And that'll be the Wahls Protocol.
Woohoo! I am
Very
so
excited.
excited. Thank
Yes.
you so much.
All
You're
right.
Great inspiration to me.
Okay, very good.
Thank you. We did it.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
Now, on to the
Okay,
next.
it's recording.
Okay, so I think it's important that people understand when we look at the molecular and cellular basis for our disease, many of our diseases that we think are so distinct, schizophrenia, autism, bipolar, learning disability, traumatic brain injury, multiple sclerosis, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, at the molecular level, they're all the same. Mitochondria that are strained, nutrition inadequacies. We'll do that again. So at the cellular level, these diseases are all the same. It's a matter of mitochondria that are strained, of nutritional inadequacies, of toxins, confused and disordered information. So when you change the lifestyle, change the diet to address those cellular processes, whatever the disease state, reliably, time and time again, what you see is steadily improved health and vitality. We have the same diseases.
Okay, I think that's really important for the general public to sort of wrap their heads around.
We all have the same diseases. Diseases of confused cells because of toxic chemicals, foods, strange foods in our food supply, toxins that we've been exposed to, and our strained mitochondria. Those are all things that are very well treated with lifestyle, not with drugs. It's all lifestyle.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. So on that note, I know it was a little breezy out there with these interviews we were doing because we couldn't really do them inside. So we kind of chose to be outside on some of them. But what do you think about this notion that all diseases are the same?
Particularly the chronic disease. I mean, it's unbelievable that most, if not all, chronic disease might have the same root. That her MS and this person's rheumatoid arthritis and your neurological symptoms that you may get and osteoporosis and Alzheimer's all might have that same root.
Absolutely. And let me just share one thing about diet. We're always trying to get people to really understand the implications of diet. That I would probably be on some pretty serious meds if I was not vigilant in the way that I eat, because I do have neurological issues. I don't have MS according to any tests or anything like that. However, if I eat similar to the way that Terry Wahls eats, for example, all of my symptoms pretty much go away until I start eating poorly again. All right, so on that note, next.
So the other thing that Dr. Wahls' tie-in does, it brings us back to what Dr. Alessio Fasano said, and what Tom O'Brien said, and what Jeff Bland said. This complex matrix that may start with this seed.
Within the gut.
Within the gut, within the person, within the environment. And we all have our own genetics. And our own genetics will then dictate what the alarm signal is in our body and where we get attacked by this alarm signal.
So we could both be exposed to the same thing, but your symptoms might involve, say, your liver, because that's where your weakness is, and it could involve my nerves. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Exactly.
Now that's novel, and that's something that a lot of people might not grab onto right away. Okay, but it's important, and I think it has a lot of merit. Okay, so next we have an autism expert, and her name is Martha Herbert, Dr. Martha Herbert. And what would you like to say about her?
Oh, Martha is this unbelievable soul. She's always thirsting for knowledge. I met Martha first at conferences to study cranial osteopathy. She's tried to learn, and she has learned cranial osteopathy. Mm-hmm. And so this person who's a PhD, MD, doing research at Harvard on autistic people came to learn from us. And
so that's a special bond. Yes. Yeah, she was very lovely to have granted us this interview. So let's take you to it.
And you'll see again how she'll go back to similar root causes.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, I am here with Martha Herbert. She is a PhD MD, and her specialty is working with autistic children. And I wanted to ask you today to maybe talk a little bit about the prevalence of autism and how it is skyrocketing in our current society.
Sure.
sorts?
Well, I'm a clinician and a researcher and an author. I've written a book, The Autism Revolution.
The Autism Revolution. Okay.
AutismRevolution.org.
And autismrevolution.org.
And in that book, I explained in great detail where I think the numbers are coming from.
Okay.
And what to do about it. And I think that the numbers are, to a great extent, a real increase, although not entirely, because there are plenty of grown-ups who weren't counted in the past who never would have understood
Okay.
to be autistic. But I really think it's a lot about the environment.
Okay.
It's about the total load of environmental stressors that are on us, minus and combined with the poor resiliency and protection we have in our health.
Okay, so those environmental factors, can you maybe tell the people what some of those are?
Poor food, poor nutrition, toxic and radiation exposures, various kinds of infections, and stress.
Okay.
Too much in too little time, not enough sleep. All of this stresses out our immune system, our chemistry, and all of that affects the brain.
Okay, and now, could this be a generational thing that our offspring are becoming weaker?
Yeah, I think that there are many kids with autism whose parents who are a little idiosyncratic,
Okay.
but they were pushed over an edge, that their parents weren't pushed over. And that's what's concerning me, is that we're getting weaker and we're getting more stressors at the same time. I mean, not that every single chemical in our environment is more than it used to be. We've gotten some of them under control, but we keep on experimenting around with new things without really looking at what works for our biology.
Okay. And how important is nutrition to this factor?
Nutrition is huge because our cells are made from the things that we eat, and we need to have healthy membranes, and we need to have healthy chemical processes, and we need to have healthy protection for our genes. And without good healthy fats and antioxidants and multicolored vegetables and fruits, we can't protect ourselves. So we need to have as much of that as possible. I call it nutrient flooding. And the more vulnerable you are, the more you need that nutrition to keep your system healthy.
Wow. Okay, so now we're being flooded with these processed foods with genetic modification, chemicals to preserve, and then fats that have been overheated.
Yeah, and an imbalance of the kinds of fats. Like we're feeding farmed fish corn. So we're only getting the omega-6s from the fish when that's where we turn to fish for omega-3s, but they're not there if the fish were fed corn. Because corns only have omega-6.
Wow. Okay, so this is all vital information for people who are maybe thinking about children. And so what can they do to maybe protect their selves so that they have less of a chance of having an autistic child?
There is evidence that having diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, which are all more extreme versions of metabolic and immune imbalance, at least double your risk of having an autistic child.
Okay.
If you start early, improving your diet, getting the unnecessary chemicals out of the house. For goodness sakes, don't remodel your house while you're pregnant because all of these things get circulated. Read them.
Okay.
Inhale them and eat them. It looks like you can substantially reduce the risk.
Okay.
People talk about preconception planning.
Yeah.
Anytime that you start to improve, take the allergens out of your diet. When you're breastfeeding, take the allergens out of your diet too. Make sure your baby gets enough sleep. All these things can really help.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
And even if they don't help 100%, it will probably be a lot better than it would be if you hadn't attended to these things.
That's really important because nutrition and our environment affects our genes.
Yeah, and affects not just our genes, but how our body works.
Okay.
You know, it doesn't really change the coding of the genes. It changes which genes turn on and which genes turn off. It also protects you against mutations from the environment.
Chris. So we've seen MDs, PhDs, chiropractors, all doing functional medicine And you might ask, well, does anybody else do it? And that's a really good question. As Chris said, and I don't know if he said in this last segment, but we'll air it if he didn't, to some degree we're degree blind. And,
That's right.
and we look for people who are interested in helping people. So you have other interviews for us of
I
other
do.
practitioners, right?
I do. I have an optometrist. Well, why would an optometrist come to a functional medicine symposium? And, well, we also have an acupuncturist. And she did a beautiful job of talking about how she felt about functional medicine. So we're going to show you those clips.